they would dry the mushrooms on the Christmas tree or on the pine tree. They would dry these mushrooms by picking them and like leaving them on the tree or something like that. And he was saying how the shamans that would perform these, oh man, I'm blanking on the word, but the shamans that would like lead the experience to the people that wanted to have the experience, eventually there was like heat on them, so they had to like sneak in to the people's houses through the chimney. So like it basically all describes Christmas through tripping balls and mushrooms. Now these mushrooms, by the way, are different than psilocybin mushrooms from the research I've done. Psilocybin mushrooms are like Liberty Caps and Penis Envy and Golden Teacher. Those are some, I think, species of psilocybin mushrooms. But the Amanita muscaria mushroom contains mucinol, which is the active supposed psychedelic chemical, whereas psilocybin mushrooms, their active ingredient is psilocybin. So it's a different chemical in the mushroom altogether, but it's supposed to provide some sort of experience. Joe was saying how they also differ and they vary throughout regions, time. There's different species of these. Very finicky, I guess. Adam's talking about how the homeless population in Austin is getting as bad as the one in Los Angeles. People camped out everywhere in the medians and stuff like that. He begins to talk about this guy who started to build mini houses for the homeless, like these small houses that people would rent for $250 a month. I think that's a really great idea. It's a superb idea. I'm going to look into this actually later tonight. Because they have to pay, but it also just it basically just goes against the whole having to buy like a $250,000 house, $300,000 house, $150,000 house. You just pay $250 a month. I really like that for people, that need shelter. Why aren't there things like that everywhere? So Adam is talking about his fans or his listeners, and he refers to them as producers. I really like this because I personally would like to come up with a name, or would like the community come up with a name for themselves. There's nothing wrong with being a fan. For example, I am a Blade fan. I am a Hawthorne Heights fan. I am a RuneScape fan. So I don't think it's derogatory at all. But I also think it would be fun to create like a little bit more of a personalized name. He calls his producers. Another thing Adam talks about is just like how we're in cancel culture, and they bring up Twitter and everything, and how you can just get in trouble, or especially if you're in like the UK or just certain areas, Canada, you can get in trouble for just saying something about someone like "okay, dude," if they're not actually identified with being a male. They talk about stuff like that in dancing. He's talking about how like the man takes the lead and the woman follows in dancing. He does it with his wife, and just something like that. Even if you were to say you get canceled, it's one of the beautiful things about this podcast, Rogan RuneScape, is that there's no holds bars. There are of course distasteful things that I will avoid, but when it comes to the sake of freedom and comedy and self-expression, I will talk about whatever I want, 100%, and that's just how it is. It's all about intention, you know what I mean? There's not any magic words that are, off limit. It's all about your intent. Words are simply words. So here at Rogan RuneScape, we're free. We have heroin epidemic, and when he was a kid, he would have never thought of heroin being on us having an epidemic. He was saying that since he was a kid, it hasn't gone down, it's gone up, because they were talking about Netherlands and Amsterdam, and it was talking about kind of like their they look away. They have a policy where it's like they look away, but it's fine. So it's some sort of translation, basically saying that they turn a blind eye to what's going on, and it's kind of similar to what certain other countries have. Certain other countries have areas of the city where you can do things like smoke cannabis purchase it. So he was talking about how there's clinics, I guess, and where you can get heroin prescriptions in Netherlands. It's a scary thing, man. I'm sure everyone's seen it in their town and city. I don't mean personally seen it, but I mean, heard or seen people that have been affected. And addiction is a very scary thing. I think, as Joe put it one time, it's like basically having a friend that was bit by a vampire, and you're just waiting for them to like shake it, but they got bit by the vampire and they turn into this new thing, and it's like they try to come back, and then all of a sudden they get taken over again, kind of like being a werewolf or a vampire. It's really sad. Ultimately, if you want something bad enough, you will make it your priority. So if you want happiness from the inside and not through external means, which I'm pretty sure is a Buddhist principle, they talk about how all pain and suffering in the world to humans is caused by them seeking for happiness through external means. It's kind of like my personal principle of, I don't have high expectations, because if you have high expectations, then you're going to be disappointed. That doesn't mean that I don't have like high taste. I kind of have champagne taste with beer money, with everything in life, whether it be food, women, beer, entertainment, whatever. I have champagne taste with beer money. So it doesn't mean that like when I have low expectations, it means like low standards. No, low expectations. And to what I mean by like, I don't really expect people to do much, or I don't really expect much from the world, because one, I know that they don't, or I know that it's not gonna happen, or two, I don't want to get excited and think, oh, I'm gonna hang out with this person 8 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock comes around, oh, I'm sorry, man, I had to ditch you, or they never reply. So I just try not to really have high expectations with anything in life. It's kind of best to just expect the worst, or hope for the best and plan for the worst. It's kind of the best way to go. One interesting thing that Adam says, I think he says the year 2008, he was saying how when we had the economy collapse or crash in 2008, his personal belief was that the only thing that saved the economy was the drug trade, pharmaceutical, or as well as illegal drug trade. Now that could be interpreted as, say, the collusion of the government with these narco traffickers, and that's a whole nother podcast episode. Don't have time to get into that right now, but like, for example, what I mean is that like 90% of the world's poppy plant is grown in Afghanistan, and all the opiates come from poppy. So if you put two and two together, and then like you think about like how we have gasoline here, so hence the whole fracking thing, Alaska, Venezuela, you start to question if we were in Afghanistan for the oil or more for the heroin trade. Not you and I, but certain people bring it in here. Because here's the thing, guys, is that, like I said, I don't have time to get into this right now, but there's money made on all aspects of it. Think about it like this. So if this were to be the case, which there are things that point towards that direction, then the government or whatever entity would make money through bringing in the drugs to the country, to their own country, then make money through setting up a system of infrastructure in which arrests these people, incarcerates them, and then tax money goes towards that to hold these prisoners, and then they can just shave off however much money through the top. And then I don't know about where you guys live, but Joe's talked about this before, privately owned prisons and jails. There's rumors here, or there's allegations here, I would say, of certain jails basically being owned by certain people or judges. Now that's all hearsay, but Joe's talked about this before. There is such thing as privately owned prisons. So what I'm saying is, okay, so you have this entity or the government, whatever you want to call it. Say if they were in Afghanistan, which 90% of the world's poppy came from, to actually be in the epicenter, or the epicenter or whatever of where it's grown, than to dictate where it gets delivered. I mean, keep in mind, guys, back in like the 1700s, there was the Opium Wars, like I've talked about before. So it's not far-fetched to think that governments would, or entities would have their hands in the illegal drug trade, especially when you think about how profitable it is. It's unimaginable amounts of money. And I love it when people say life is not all about drugs. Because if you look at the globe, and if you look at the countries and the governments and the people, and the prescriptions and the depression, you'll realize actually that more of life is about substances and things that change the way you feel and think than you think that it is. So try to backtrack again. So you have the government or the entity or whatever making money from bringing the drugs into their own country, then arresting the people and taking tax money to house them, and then shaving off the top, allegedly, and then you make money through them being on probation because it costs money to go to probation and court fees. Then they make money through the state-sponsored clinics, quote unquote. So not only are you paying weekly for your AA class, or not AA, I'm sorry, but for your if you got like a DUI and you have to go to probation and do these classes ASAP or whatever it's called, I forget. But you go to these classes, you have to pay for it, and it costs a lot of money. So making money through bringing the drugs in, making money through arresting people that use the drugs that have been brought in, make money through making them pay court fees and programs, make money then through these quote-unquote clinics of methadone and Suboxone, which, if you think about it, guys, all it is government-sanctioned drugs. It's the same thing. Look at Adderall. Adderall amphetamine hydrochloride is literally methamphetamine hydrochloride. Oxycodone, morphine, is literally like morphine hydrochloride. Like morphine and codeine are the oh man, I forget what the name is, but the alkaloids. Yes, they are the active alkaloids in the poppy plant that make oxycodone. All these opiates, all opiates are made from morphine and codeine. Now there are synthetic forms of opiates called opioids, which would be like I'm not gonna, synthetic opioid would be like a tramadol, or like a Suboxone, I think, would be a synthetic opioid. Anyways, my point is, are you keeping up with how many ways that they're making money? If you were to be an entity or a government that was actually telling people, oh no, drugs are bad, we're going to put you in jail for it. Absolutely not. There's no tolerance. 10 years in jail if you, have some mushrooms or whatever, some acid. 10 years in jail, if you have some cocaine or heroin, whatever it is. And I'm not even talking about like selling it or whatever, because, that's a whole different thing. Obviously, kids need to be completely kept out of this, because your brain's developing until you're 25, your prefrontal cortex, your frontal lobe. But what I'm saying is that we're basically being told no, and then these huge punishments are being put on people, years of their lives being taken away from them in confinement, when in reality there are things that do point to the direction of there being entities or governments that bring drugs into their own country, make money that way, then make money through arresting them, then make money through putting or keeping them in prison, then make money through like having these programs set up, then make money through getting them on these government sanctioned I can't think of it. It's basically synonymous. It's the same thing. Like I was saying, it's Suboxone and all the stuff is the same as the heroin. It's just different. It's just it's the exact same thing basically. It's just made and approved by the government. So then you got